I was born in Zimbabwe and moved to the UK when I was about 13 years old. I started painting because I had a particularly stressful job and one that I couldn't find a lot of meaning in. It was very glorified data entry in a really tough industry in investment banking. And I felt like everything I was doing, all the work I was doing, was very intense but didn't change very much. And I had a very ridiculous thought one day that if I was hit by a bus, all that would have changed in the world is an Excel spreadsheet. And luckily a friend of mine recommended we go to a couple of galleries. I'd never been, it wasn't a big deal in my family to go to exhibitions, so the first time I went to a gallery I was about 21. And after that I went on a weekend course and started painting, and I then started making a painting every day as a way of making something beautiful every day that would kind of be sort of I was here. I would say that the way that I paint has definitely changed over time. I think the first time I started showing people my paintings, there's something I've read somewhere that said, you know, if a painting is never seen by anyone other than the artist, is it really art? And I started to think there's a lot of truth in that, because there's something in that response to a work that also tells me that it's a good or bad painting. There's what I see in it and what I'm happy with and that end result, and before anyone else ever sees the painting, it's gone past that threshold. But when I started showing people my work, it sort of added a different pressure, because people always saw different things to what I not necessarily intended for them to see, but what I saw in the painting and what I was feeling and going through at the time that I made the painting. And the interesting thing that I found is that, and actually this came most recently about 2 years ago, I started realizing that there were patterns in my work, and the reason that I thought a particular painting was successful or not was because you could actually follow sort of kaleidoscopic patterns across the painting. When you can read the painting like that, your eye is engaged, but so is your imagination, so is your mind in trying to work out and rationalize a pattern. And whenever there's a sort of intellectual challenge, that starts to create a more interesting and more engaging painting that you can always come back to. And I think awareness of that made me, as I'm painting, think a little bit more about that. Like, is my painting balanced when you read it across? Does it work? And that adds pressure. So I try to both continue to experiment, learn different ways of making works, and certainly keep to the core of I need to be enjoying it, I need to be feeling an emotional release out of it. But I want to improve as an artist, I want to grow, I want my work to say something important about the condition of humanity, which sounds so arrogant, I know. But it's, for me, it's a process that I used to engage with just as, ooh, fun colors. And then thinking, okay, how do I rationalize it? And then thinking more emotionally, what does this mean? Philosophically, what is it that I'm trying to say and do with my art? So when I first started painting, I did the classic thing that anyone who's new to painting might do. I tried to do a couple of portraits, a couple of landscapes, and it was just an unmitigated disaster. I was completely untrained. I hadn't done any art at school or university, and I was coming at it really as a way of finding self-expression and getting energy out that I couldn't quite articulate all the time. And I remember starting with just primary colors, black and white, and I thought if I mix the colors and until I get something I'm finding interesting on the canvas, and I continue to do that until I'm happy with what's in front of me. I sort of let the painting evolve and kind of describe itself, rather than coming at it with a very premeditated idea of this is what I want the end picture to look like. I tended to find a lot more success in that, and by success in a painting I mean that it's pleasing to the eye. It was something that I couldn't quite measure, But the job I was doing was so specific and you had to be so accurate in terms of detail. Painting was a really good release from that, but I found I could only get that if I didn't start with, I'm going to paint an apple today, or try and represent something in front of me. It lost its main cause if I tried to do that. So I really fell in love with the abstract process of just mixing color and knowing from the beginning that what ended up on the paper or on the canvas might be something I'm not happy with, but that's not necessarily the point. The point is a process. The point is just kind of working it out and potentially discovering something beautiful at the end. I love, obviously, the abstract expressionists, and most people, when they look at the stuff that I was doing very, very early on, would say, oh, it's very Jackson Pollock, because I was throwing paint more at paper or canvas. But I really love the women of the abstract expressionist movement. So Lee Krasner, I thought was really interesting. Helen Frankenthaler, her just huge paintings. I think her work looks more delicate, but it's actually quite physically gestural, and I think that tension between a very feminine kind of palette, but the physical way of making such a big work, I find really interesting. And obviously there's quite a few African female artists who I've been posting about recently, whose work I'm really interested in. And I always pronounce her name wrong, but Ndidi is somebody whose paintings I'm really enjoying. The best way to find me is on Instagram. I post every day, and I try and post both my own work, but also artists that I find interesting, and to give shout outs to people whose work I think is underappreciated or needs to be noticed. You can find me at Bokani, or you can check out my website, Art by Bokani, and I'm excited to say that the artists from the Big Painting Challenge and I are going to be doing a group show in central London on May the 9th to the 27th. So again, all the details for that are on my website, www.artbybokani.